said yet, but they want it to be the Farm Fest of infrastructure nerds. They want it to be. They just did it last year, and it was twice the things they thought it was going to be, thankfully. So I'm going to just keep doing that and bigger and bigger. They doubled the size of our facility now. We can really open the doors on some stuff. Exciting. Yeah. Nerd prom is what they're hoping for.
Just double checking everyone. Oh, I unmuted that. Can you hear us again?
Yes.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I think we have everyone back, so we can go ahead and restart. So next piece is really for Bree to give us a little bit of an overview of Office of Broadband Development and what's happening with broadband over time. So Bree, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, before I get started, I know for the sake of time and that Chuck Ackman is here, very busy with Senator Klobuchar's office, but some of you clearly online may not have known that he was in the room and wanted just to make sure that everybody could say hi. And Chuck, if you wanted a minute or two, you're welcome to. Otherwise, Chuck and I go way back, similar roles in my previous job, and so just thank you for being here. And
You said exactly what I was going to say. So Bree and I go with.
Yeah,
Yes.
Come on, Chuck, you can go right in front of the camera there.
I'm actually here in person.
Very close. Okay, well, anyways, I know he had to head out, so I wanted to make sure we recognized him. So I'm going to give a brief update, and then I'm going to turn some of my update over to Hannah Buckland. But okay.
Tech issue too.
I don't know what I'm saying next, so.
Yeah.
Well, we'll figure it out. So a lot of you probably know a lot of this information already, but because there are some new people, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the Office of Broadband, as well as just encourage any one of you that would like to have a one-on-one meeting with myself or a member of my team in order to learn a little bit more of what we do. We're very much happy to do that, but didn't want to take a lot of time today, so very high level. So the Office of Broadband was created into law and state statute in 2013, and our first funding grant round was in 2014. And as you can see, our purpose is really large, but really encompasses making sure that we are serving underserved and unserved locations, as well as in accessibility, but then all the other things. And many of you represent a lot of those growing areas within our state. For the purpose of this group, again, is our framework is around statutory goals. So as you heard, we talked about the state's statutory goals for 2026 are 100 by 20. And so that's what we continue to work for. We have had a robust mapping program since, I believe, 2008. The mapping system is on our website. Anybody can go on and use that and look through the information, and as well as members of my team are always happy to walk through sort of how to use that. So I know with their township associations, we went to the regional meetings. Some of Steve's memberships would come up and really want to take a deep dive into their township. And so happy to sort of navigate those things with folks across the state. So we do have the Office of Broadband and help with administrative roles of the task force to be a resource, but really we are here to support your work. And then finally, we have tools in our tool belt. So we have our grant infrastructure programs. We, again, can help with some mapping and technical assistance across the state. And now we are working in the digital equity space as well. I love this photo. So for many of you, when I started last October, there was about half of us. And another reason that I love this photo is you can see we are geographically located across the state. I am truly a believer in attracting and retaining incredible staff, and that one of the ways and tools we're able to do that is having broadband access, but also allowing for these great people to work where they live. We are working on final offers for 2 more grant positions. This is not only because of the additional federal dollars, but also because we have ran really lean for many years. And this team who has been here longer than me, just are so dedicated to the work, truly care about the mission, and they work way more than they should be. And so with that being said, I do have a few of the new ones that have started since a lot of you haven't, but maybe for the sake of all of you not being, everybody being new, we could just do a quick introduction if folks are on. Now, just also, some are not on because we are in the middle of our digital opportunity listening sessions, so some are not available, but I think most of them are. So I'm going to call upon a couple folks that I know that are new that are on. So Megan.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm joining you today from lovely Two Harbors, Minnesota, where we will have our 13th regional digital opportunity listening session. And I have been hired since July to be the new Digital Equity Grants Administrator, currently located in Minneapolis, but I call Candy, Ojai, Renville, and Yellow Medicine County my home stomping grounds. And I have experience working for Upper Sioux community, Pejudizizi Oyate, for over 12 years. And I have also worked for the Native American Community Clinic, and have lots of different hats I've worn for nonprofits over the years. So I'm very excited to jump into this digital equity work and learn as well from all of you. Thank you.
I'm going to be selfish because I think we should just have everybody introduce themselves. Jen, are you on? She's actually on her way to it. Yeah, so she might not be on because she is helping at our event today. Carrie. Okay.
Good morning. Sorry
Oh,
about
there
that.
you are. Go for it.
I'm here. I'm Carrie Jansen. I'm a broadband grant administrator. I work with the infrastructure projects. I've been here since January of 2022. Prior to that, I worked in county government for many years. Renville County is where I currently reside, and happy to meet everybody.
Thanks, Carrie. Mike?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Mike Wimmer. I'm a broadband grants administrator with the Office of Broadband. I started back in February. Previous work history includes serving as the Mille Lacs County Economic Development Manager, and then also had a stint working on broadband issues in Colorado. So I'm excited to be part of the team, and thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Diane?
Hi, Diane Wells, and I'm the Deputy Director of the office, and I've been here since the office opened back in 2013. Good to see everyone again.
Thanks, Diane. And I believe Jared is in transit. I don't know that he's on. And Kate, I believe she's on the way too. And then Olu is actually in one of our military branches and is out for a couple weeks serving our country, but he is a new addition and he will enjoy meeting him when he's able to. And then Hannah Buckland is here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. No, let me do it. My name is Hannah Buckland. I'm the Digital Equity Program Lead. I've been with Office of Broadband since August of 2022. Prior to that, worked as a librarian for 10 years, including with State Library Services at the Minnesota Department of Education and Leech Lake Tribal College. I was on Governor Dane's task force on broadband from 2015 to 2018. So it's fun to be on this side of things.
And then Carol?
I'm Carol Bissett, and I am the Broadband Program Assistant, and I've been with the Broadband Office since January of 2022. So a year and 8 months. And before that, but I've worked for the state for 21 years. I worked at Southwest Minnesota State University for like 19 years, so in many different hats there too. So I'm glad to be here. And I'm from Cottonwood, Minnesota, so way in the southwest part of the state.
Thank you for the extra time to do that. I know that I'm very biased, but I have probably the best team and it continues to grow. And I hope you all have great experiences with any one of them that you get to encounter along the way here. So with that being said, we'll keep moving. So just to point out that this was based on the governor's last task force report in November of 2022. And just, wanted everybody to be aware visually that we still have a lot of unmet needs to date. And so I know that it's hard to see and it's online, but this is the work, is an example of the work that the previous task force did in identifying gaps across the state. And as I said when we started, we have some tools in our tool belt. So the infrastructure grant program, we have the border-to-border grant program, which is up to 50% cost share for eligible costs to be able to deploy broadband across the state with our internet service providers who apply for those grants. Recognizing that 50% still leaves a lot of our state unserved because it isn't a good business model for providers to go into locations that have really low density and the take rate isn't there. So it was created as a pilot. It is no longer a pilot, but that provides up to 75% of the eligible cost, up to $10 million per project. And I will just say the legislative change this past year, sorry, Devin, you were probably going to say, we did move border to border from 5 million to 10 million as well. So, and then the final one is the line extension program. And this is really to sort of help bridge those gaps of those little missing lines that maybe passed by but didn't get extended to the home. And we're just in the first review process of the first round of that. We had over 2,100 registered individual residents and businesses in the first 6 months, and hope to make some awards at the end of this month. And there's $15 million in that until it's gone under capital project fund dollars.
Is there a per project cap on that one?
25,000 per pass. However, this is our first round. We don't have a lot of, we're working through it. We'll have more data after that, but we hope that there's a local match as well. So what the overall cost is could vary a little bit, up to 25,000. I know this is extremely small, and again, happy to share the slides later, but I just want to show you all the impact across the state that has happened over the previous 8 grant rounds, and that they are color-coded. The flags are to show that we work really hard to have geographically dispersed grants when we have applications in those regions, as well as trying our best to get to every county and working with the providers in those areas to fund really solid projects. And so with that, transitioning a little bit, and Tom will talk much more about that, but as we all know, we do have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that Minnesota will be getting about $652 million to continue broadband deployment across the state. So our development of the plan, the initial plan was submitted in July, and it is available online. So that's our action plan. How are we going to do all that we're going to do? Our draft initial BEAD plan is due at the end of December, and then the final plan will be due a year after the initial plan is approved. After that, we will have 4 years to do all the infrastructure projects that need to get done, and just learned last week that there is a possibility of a 1-year extension if necessary. How will it be used? So we here at the state have been directed by our legislature that IIJA fund for broadband will flow through our existing program. So within the framework that we have existing. The details that are in the initial proposal will have our challenge process. So not the challenge process of once a grant is awarded or when we're doing grant applications, but a pre-challenge process on eligible locations. Within the plan will also be sub-grantee selections and high cost threshold formulas. We do have to stick with the priorities. So the first priority within the notice of funding is that we need to get to all unserved locations first. Our dollar amount was calculated based on the FCC maps of the unserved locations. And we know that most of us in the room know that those maps are not fully correct. And so we're still working on some challenges there. There'll be the challenge process as well. So we know that sort of those numbers are going to be a little bit lucrative. The next priority is underserved locations. So unserved is 25/3 without low speeds, and underserved is 100 by 20. Again, recognizing Minnesota speed goals, statutory goals are 100 by 20. And so a little bit, again, just where Minnesota's at. And then the third priority we hope to get to if we have additional funding is making sure community anchor institutions have that symmetrical service that, again, is laid out in our note. Again, just to recognize that the challenge process we hope will begin in early 2024, and that will give us the list of final eligible locations. Only local units of government, providers, internet service providers, and nonprofits are going to be able to do that challenge process.
Why is that?
It's a good time question. That's an NTIA question, right? Yeah, I think so. Unless you have it in your slides and you can hold off, but I'm fine for
the idea is that when you have individual challengers, you don't always get consistent or data that fits the format. So by having those three categories of eligible challengers, the hope is that they would gather it from the community, make sure that it's correct, in the right format, provide all the information that is needed, and then upload it as a default challenge. And that also makes it faster to process for broadband office. And everything's correct and consistent. The idea is to make it a little bit easier and to hope that it boosts the community to any of those three categories of engagement.
Now, individuals can still do the FCC map challenge as well, and that information will be coming to the office. So like that can continue to happen, but in this formal challenge process is laid out like Tom has shared. Oh, is there a question online?
Brandon, this is Daniel Edmond. Good morning, everybody. Apologies for being a little late. We had an internal meeting here at the league. In relation to the challenge process, are there deed efforts or OBD efforts to try and directly engage local units of government and nonprofits? I know there have been some maybe NTIA hosted webinars, and we've been trying to push out information to our member cities, but I'm just wondering what the efforts have been to ensure that these entities that are the only entities able to participate in that official challenge process, if DEED and OBD have been engaging those entities to make sure that they are A, aware, and B, hopefully reviewing those maps in a way that would be meaningful to that process.
Yeah, well, and thank you. That's a really good point. And we have been trying to have meetings. So we recently had an MTA meeting, Minnesota Telecom Association. We're going to be meeting with cable folks. We'll continue to have meetings with the counties, certainly your annual meetings, and trying to get the word out there as best that we can. Early on, we did some outreach when it came to individuals challenging the FCC maps before our allocation was out there, but certainly happy to work with any of your associations on doing more of that. And also just recognizing that some of our counties have robust GIS systems, have all of those things, and others don't. And so how can we work individually with any of those locations to really help them, knowing that also our staff is limited, but we do now have a GIS person in-house. So we will have some more technical assistant capacity here.
Yeah, the question, I guess the tag on question is there funding associated with supporting this additional work that we're asking nonprofits and counties and cities to do?
It was not written in our planning funding. I mean, we do work with Connected Nation, and they are doing some additional mapping and work. And then also, I will just say, like, as a staff, gearing up my team to have more technical capacity has been a focus as well. In our digital opportunity planning process, we did have some micro grants. But as far as, like, you know, this component of it, because we were directed by the legislature to sort of run it through the systems that be, we haven't created any grant programs for this particular work. I don't know, Diane, do you want to add, since Diane is leading our B plan, if there's more there that...
No, we had $5 million in planning grant funding, and we didn't include grants to local communities to do the challenge process. When we did the budget, it was the summer of 2022. We had no idea what the challenge process was going to look like. And then any money for broadband infrastructure for BEAD, the legislature has directed to go into infrastructure. So, you know, our goal has been to put as much money as possible into building the infrastructure.
We do have money for mapping. And like I said, we are working, and Connected Nation, who is our vendor, has been doing some additional pieces of fabric mapping. But yeah, to her point, and also like a lot of the challenge process components and technical assistance guidelines are most recently coming out in like July. Like, so we couldn't even predict what we had to predict in the planning. Now that doesn't mean we can't look at budget modifications, but at this point in the game, and as the guidance keeps coming out and is a little different because every state's different and we're all learning things, there probably just isn't going to be a lot of capacity to be able to do that. Not that we shouldn't look into it, but that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I just feel like if we're going to cut off individuals from being able to, you know, raise challenges, and then, you know, asking organizations to do this additional, you know, unpaid work, there should be a mechanism to, you know, fund that work. Because the only people that have the funding to make the challenges are the ISPs, who, I mean, that's their business and that's how they make money. It just seems kind of like the balance of powers.
Well, and I will just say, I mean, to the point, and not that we as the Office of Broadband, as we continue to fund, and we have another $100 million by the legislature, the NTIA dollar allocation is based on the FCC maps as it is. Now, we will continue to find unserved locations for a long time, but we do not, this dollar amount has to serve those locations first and foremost with this funding, because that's what's been identified. So even as we're finding more locations, we will have to figure out how to get there, but the funding itself, this dollar amount is based on the 135 unserved locations as identified at the time the cutoff was on the FCC maps where we were directed our funding, or allocated our funding. And we know that this dollar amount is not going to be enough to achieve our statutory goals or all the areas that, as laid out, are still missing from this particular formula. I don't have to take a lot of time on here, but just know the time frame in general. We to submit our final plan again at the end of December. That's the initial plan. Once approved, we'll have another year to finalize our plan, and we'll take what we need within those years, that year, and then we're hoping that once everything's approved, we'll be able to submit our final proposal and get to work. And so there will be a delay in the actual funding being able to be used. Not that it won't, we're working on some opportunities to get the funding at least in the state so that we're able to do sub-grantee grant rounds, just because we're not allowed, we have some RFP rules we have to follow. So working through some of those pieces, but as you can see, construction and all of those things we're not predicting to really start in Minnesota until 2026. And some of that is just based on weather and availability of all of the things.
That's just the IIJ money.
Yes. And I forgot to note, we are planning on rolling out our next border-to-border low-density grant round in October. That's $50 million, and that will be $30 million will go into our traditional border-to-border, 50 million or 20 million will go into the low population. So that is coming soon. So based on the legislative directive this year. And then locations for the BEAD funding. I know that this is a little messy and again, probably hard to see, but just wanted you to see visually where we're able to use and what it looks like based on that funding. So as I talked about, based on the FCC mapping. And now I'm going to turn it over to Hannah to talk a little bit more about the Digital Equity Act and the work we're doing.
So complementary to the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, we have the Digital Equity Act, which is what my position focuses on. The Digital Equity Act is included within IIJA, and it provides $2.75 billion for digital equity programs and activities. This is looking beyond infrastructure to also look at issues related to affordability, access to devices, access to digital skills training, technical support. Within the Digital Equity Act, there are 3 funding categories. Right now, all states and territories, and soon some tribes, are working with a total of $60 million in planning grants. Minnesota's is just shy of $882,000 for our planning grant. These planning grants, for the most part, run through the duration of 2023. And the purpose of the planning grant is to support Minnesota in creating a digital opportunity plan that will be funded using a capacity grant in the second phase of this. The capacity grants are supported at $1.44 billion. We don't yet know what Minnesota's amount will be for our capacity grant. If you do some cross multiplication, it looks like it could be between 20 and 25 million. And this is in addition to the BEAD funding. So BEAD will be focused on infrastructure, and at the same time, this Digital Equity Act funding will be coming out to support use of the infrastructure. The third category is for competitive grants. This is funded at $1.25 billion. Competitive grants are administered directly by NTIA, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, to local governments, anchor institutions, etc. So it's conceivable that in Minnesota we could have organizations that our office is working with to support using that capacity grant, and at the same time they might be receiving competitive grant funding directly from NTIA. So there's a whole new puzzle in the future with this. We'll go to the next slide. The planning process has been fast and has allowed for very little breathing. We began this work in January. In April, the digital equity planning really took off in earnest. In Minnesota, our strategy for digital equity planning has been these things that we've dubbed digital connection committees. Digital connection committees are self-selected voluntary work groups. They've been formed by political subdivisions, tribes, anchor institutions, nonprofits, businesses, faith-based organizations, combinations of these, some of these, none of these, all of these, everything at once. When I pitched this to Bree first, she was like, this sounds interesting, but like, how many groups are you gonna get? And I said, I don't know, I think I could try really hard and get 20. And we ended up with about 100 of these committees statewide. It's a pretty even split between greater Minnesota and the metro. And one of the ways we were able to get about 100 committees is by offering non-competitive mini grants. It's a maximum of $4,000. And this supported 68 committees in helping us gather digital inclusion data, stories, numbers, whatever was meaningful locally was the data we were interested in. So we ended up with 256 extremely different data submissions from all of these committees. That has been cobbled together during the month of July to create the draft digital opportunity plan that's posted on our website now. We're in the public comment period for that draft plan. The end of the public comment period is September 29th. In October, we'll do revisions, and then the final plan is due in November. There's a little island in December because I plan to go off the grid entirely and not think about the internet at all and take a vacation. Maybe I'll do a presentation of photos from whatever wonderful place I go. We can go to the next slide. So here's where we are now with the digital opportunity plan. It's evolved from digital equity in name to digital opportunity. This is based on feedback we got from those digital connection committees. Some of them mentioned that the phrase digital equity was too jargony to be of use. Others mentioned that the phrase digital equity wasn't translating well from English to other languages. So a full draft of the plan, it's 110 pages, is available on our website. We have the public comment period open now through September 29th. You can submit comments through an online form by mail if you want to send us a handwritten note or postcard. And then during the listening sessions, we've done 16 in-person and 2 virtual listening sessions. Just 4 more left after today. Kate, Megan, and Jen are in 2 harbors for a session today. We have Deer River tomorrow. Dinner will be served at that one, courtesy of our co-host. We're back in Minneapolis on Thursday, and the next week we have International Falls, Bemidji, and another virtual session. The registration information for these is all on that same website. So I encourage you all to check out the plan and please submit comments. They matter to us. So I'll turn it back to you, Brie, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not going to take much time because I know we're over, but if you are not aware and your communities are not aware of the Affordable Connection Committee, that this is not something we administer, but we strongly support that having access is one thing, being able to afford it is another barrier. And so if you're not aware of this, just like that slide up and then if you need any contact information away from what we've already shared, there is the contact information. And again, apologize for going over, but good questions, and we will certainly do our best to address those.
Thank you, Bree. And like I said, if you have more questions, you can reach out to Bree or the rest of the staff. We'll have many more sessions during the task force meetings to be able to dive deeper into some of the work that we'll need. So, many more opportunities there. So we're running a little behind, but I think we'll easily catch up. The next topic is the open meeting law. NTIA Smith is with us.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I will get my slides up here. I will not take a lot of time. I'll go pretty quickly for you here for the open meeting law. My name is Taya Moxley-Goldsmith. I'm the director of the Data Practices Office. I am searching for my slides. Here they are. Despite the name Data Practices Office, we also are a statewide resource on the open meeting law, so we answer questions related to that law as well. And so I'm going to go very briefly over the requirements. You have the folks at DEED who are helping you out with the administrative stuff, and so they will certainly be a resource for you on the open meeting law as well. But of course, the voting members of this public body are on the hook for making sure you're meeting these requirements. For those of you who are familiar with the open meeting law related to local public bodies, the law related to state level bodies is a little bit different, just as a nod to the fact that state level bodies draw from folks, you know, all over the state, and state level bodies need a little bit more flexibility. So if you are familiar with local public bodies, you might see a little bit of a difference here, and that is why. So the open meeting law is in Chapter 13D of Minnesota statutes, and in a nutshell, it just says that with limited exceptions, all meetings of public bodies must be open to the public, so the public can attend and see what you're up to. The Minnesota Supreme Court has also stated there are three sort of policy purposes for the open meeting law. One is to prohibit actions taken at secret meetings, so that's that public transparency piece that is so important to the public work that you're doing, to assure the public's right to be informed, and to give the public an opportunity to present its views to the public body. So the Supreme Court identified that last one, and we do note it, but in fact the open meeting law doesn't say anything about reserving time for public comment. So you may want to do that, and that's up to you, but the open meeting law itself doesn't say anything about that. What is a meeting that's subject to the requirements that I'm going to talk about today? The open meeting law actually doesn't include a definition of meeting, so we look to this court case from 1983 that tells us that a meeting subject to the open meeting law is a gathering of voting members, a quorum or more of voting members that are discussing, deciding, or receiving information as a group related to official business. So both of those things need to be true for there to be a meeting that is then subject to the requirements of Chapter 13D. So if one or both of these things is not true, then you're not having a meeting. So for instance, gatherings that are not subject to the law in general, gatherings of less than a quorum of members are not going to be a meeting. So I believe there's supposed to be 15 of you, so 3 or 4 of you, 2 of you can talk about business. In general, that's going to be okay. So there's not a quorum of voting members. Generally, it's okay for you to discuss business. Chance or social gatherings, if you're all at a broadband event together and you don't talk about business, then that's fine. If you're all at somebody's retirement party, again, as long as you confine your discussion to your thoughts about the Vikings' chances this year or what you're doing this weekend or whatever, fine, you're not having a meeting. Just know with those chance or social gatherings, if you have folks, members of the public that are avidly following the work that you do, if they see you all together, they're going to assume you're talking about business. So obviously you all just want to keep public perception in mind if that does come up. There's some guidance from the Attorney General's office and the Department of Administration where I work that training and team building activities are generally not going to be meetings, again, so long as you don't discuss business during those gatherings. Some special considerations for you to think about as a group. You want to avoid discussions with a quorum plus on email. When emails start to look like you're having discussions about business and a quorum is involved, it starts to look a little bit more like the gathering that the Supreme Court was talking about in terms of what is a meeting. There's an advisory opinion from the Commissioner of Administration from 2009 that talked about a public body where all the members were talking on email. The emails were going back and forth very quickly. They were deciding whether to send a press release, what the words were going to say, and then they actually, decided and had their executive director issue the press release. So the commissioner said that looked like a meeting. It involved all the folks that were voting members, and so that was a violation of the open meeting law. So you just want to be intentional. You want to be aware and circumspect about your email communication. You can definitely have, again, discussions smaller than a quorum. You can certainly have communications, one-way communications. You can have any communications you need with the folks at DEED who are sending out the information and setting agendas. That's all fine. But as you're talking with one another on email, really avoid that reply all and then starting discussions so you don't find yourself in trouble. In terms of serial meetings, as I mentioned in the last slide, you can talk to each other, certainly even about business in groups of less than a quorum, except for these circumstances of serial meetings, which the Supreme Court has said could be a violation of the open meeting law, which is smaller meetings where you go from, maybe 3 of you are talking and then one of you goes and talks to 3 more people and you're trying to fashion agreement outside of your task force meeting. Those would be serial meetings and they could be violations of the open meeting law. So again, you want to be aware of the number of folks and the activity. That's how you're determining whether a meeting is taking place. There are 3 different kinds of meetings, and a couple probably might not be relevant necessarily to the work that you're doing. The type of meeting determines what kind of notice is provided. So again, you probably have some folks who are assisting you with providing notice and that kind of thing, but you still need to be aware just generally of what the requirements are. So for regular meetings, you just have it posted on the website, and there is a website now, and you have this meeting, for instance, right now posted on it. And that's all you have to do. For special meetings, that's any meeting that is not on that regular meeting notice. So anything that's not on the regular meeting notice is going to be a special meeting, and that requires a 3-day advance posting, and it's limited. It's more limited than a regular meeting. In general, at a regular meeting, you're going to follow whatever rules you have, bylaws that the task force has about having meetings. You can add things to your agenda, take things off. It's all fine. For a special meeting, however, the notice has to include the purpose of the meeting, and then the discussion has to be limited to that purpose. And so to the extent that you have special meetings, I'm not sure if this task force does, but to the extent that you do have them, certainly your chair and your staff will kind of orchestrate the conversations to make sure that you're just limited to the purpose that you listed on the notice. For emergency meetings, this is the last category of meeting. This is probably not going to come up for you much. This is when 3 days, circumstances don't allow for that 3-day notice. For local public bodies, this is when there's, a flood or maybe a pipe burst at the school or something. You have to make a decision right away. So that all the notice that's required is a good faith effort to notify media that requested notice. So very limited circumstances. I don't think it will come up much for this particular group. For closing meetings, again, I don't know if you have authority to close meetings. I will say that you can only close meetings if required or permitted in the law. So you actually have to have a statute that allows or requires you to close a meeting in order to do so. Just because something's sensitive or you want to kind of keep it away from the public is not enough to say, okay, we're closing a meeting. All closed meetings have to be recorded, except for those closed subject to the attorney-client privilege exception. And then there has to be a statement on the record before closing a meeting saying what is that legal authority that allows you to close the meeting, and then describes what will be discussed. So to the extent that you have closed meetings, those are the things that you need to do before you do that. Meetings and technology. This law, the open meeting law, is a very old law. There aren't a lot of nods to how we do business nowadays in the modern world. The legislature has tried in the last couple of years to kind of update these provisions around interactive meetings, especially given what we all learned in the last several years during pandemic times and when people were remote. But state level public bodies can hold telephone meetings or interactive technology meetings at any time. So this is one of those differences for state level bodies and local public bodies. The requirements are that all members can hear one another and testimony. So you can see that. It's nice if we can all see each other and have cameras up, but that's actually not one of the requirements. It's just you need to be able to hear one another. The public can hear discussion, votes, and testimony. One voting member of the entity is physically in the regular meeting room, and then the votes need to be taken by roll call. Another requirement is public may monitor from remote site if practicable. Modern interactive technology is really easy, so it's very easy for us to let the public monitor remotely now. There should be notice that members may participate remotely, and then for a regular meeting, there's a 10-day advance web posting notice. Again, your notice is probably already on the website, so you're probably covered there. There are penalties and remedies for not following this law. This law, for everybody who is familiar with it and knows about it, does not have a lot of teeth, but just so you're aware, an intentional violation is a $300 fine. 3 separate intentional violations, you forfeit your office. I will say this probably won't come up for you because the Supreme Court has said it does need to be 3 separate adjudications. So this is more for local public bodies where we have folks serving for a very long time. A reasonable cost disbursements and attorney's fees may be awarded to a prevailing party, so be aware of that. But importantly, no reversal of public body actions taken while in violation of the law. So even if a meeting violates the law, if you've taken action in it, reversal is not a remedy. The Supreme Court has said that's not in 13D, so that action would still stand. And that is it. So if you have questions related to the open meeting law, please reach out to us. This is all the ways that you can connect with us. Again, you have the folks at DEED that you can connect with and talk about in particular how the task force is running and if you have questions. But you can certainly reach out to us. We talk about this law and the Data Practices Act all day long. This is my direct line. I'm happy to take any questions now, or again, feel free to reach out whenever you want.
Thank you, Taya. Any questions for Taya? One thing is that we weren't able to, I know we could see it on Teams, we weren't able to see it on the screen here in the room. The information, but hopefully we'll give it to Carol and then she can distribute the rest of the task force members. So,
I am happy to send that out to Carol so you can have it.
okay. Any questions for her? Not hearing any questions. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. Good overview, and I know this has come up several times in the last year, so.
Great. All right. Have a great rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along. Have Devin here with us. Covers a little bit about the legislative process. I think we'll have more of this discussion about how that works, but just a very high level overview. I'll put that, Devin.
Sure. Thank you, Teddy. I see we're having the same problem. I can see it on my team screen here, but share that one to the screen. Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
All right, never mind. I knew the whole thing. My name is Devin Bowdry. I'm the legislative liaison here at DEED, part of our government relations office. We're a team of two. Broadband is one of the handful of things that I cover. So during the legislative session, I'm up there and give you a really general, high-level, quick rundown of just the basics of the legislative process. And then at the end, I'll kind of tie in how broadband shows up in the legislature. It's going to sound like high school government class at first. I'm not going to go into more detail for time's sake and for my job security. It's like too much. So I'll kick it off. The Minnesota State Legislature runs on a 2-year cycle, biennial cycle. Year one, colloquially called the budget year. Year two is a policy year. So in that first year, it's a long session. It's busy. It comes right after an election year, so there's that momentum there. And that's where we set a 2-year budget. So the budget that's passed, usually, $50-some billion is going to cover year one and year two. Year two is shorter, and it's typically for budget neutral or non-budget policy changes. Come back, we take a look at what was passed the year prior. We need to fix anything. We need to look at like big regulatory tweaks, things like that. DEED doesn't have a ton of policy-heavy programs. We're not a regulatory agency, so it's even a lot quieter for us. And most of broadband's focus comes in. Then capital investment comes up in year two. That's public debt to fund projects, and then supplemental budget items could be considered. That's usually determined on how much the surplus is, and it's usually reserved for emergency type items, a flood, funding. Broadband doesn't usually come up. And bills, of course, bills are just instructions, programs, create statutes. Broadband's bill is usually very short, it's just a few lines. Here's $100 million for the program. Cannabis bill is quite long, it's 3 pages, so there's a range. And then bills change throughout the process. Of course, the legislative session is several months, and so you see the beginning might not be there in the same version at the end. And then, of course, as you probably all know, the same version needs to pass both the House and the Senate before it can go to the governor. And then, just on this types of bills, these are some jargon terms that you might hear come up. So a companion bill is just an identical bill that's introduced on the House and the Senate, and they usually move together. Since you need to pass both on the side, it's easier to kind of just move them at the same time rather than do one all on the House and then go to the Senate and then go through the process starting at the beginning. Everything at the same time. Phone bill. So each bill has a chief author, main legislature or lawmaker that is going to carry the bill throughout the session. And then co-authors can sign on. It's typically just a show of support for that bill. But they can also serve as like backup chief author can't present for whatever reason. So as it pertains to broadband, you might see a bill come out for funding, $10 million for the program. And there's a cap on how many co-authors can sign on, but maybe more people want to show support. So you'll see an identical bill come up later. You'll be like, why is this, why do we have the same exact thing? It's just symbolic show of support. Next is the omnibus bill, which is always important. This is just one big bill comprised of many, many smaller bills. That's usually how our funding gets passed at the state legislature. Broadband usually shows up in the agricultural omnibus bill, so you'll have a section of broadband provisions, and then above that you'll have all the different components. What do you think about those? A standalone bill, they could pass broadband on its own outside of an omnibus bill, but it never happens. But if it ever did, we just call it a standalone bill. And then session law versus statutes. Session law expires at the end of the 2-year biennium. Funding is usually passed in session law. It expires. Sometimes reports are passed in session law and they expire. Whereas statute are things that are, and those are, they have chapter numbers and codes. You can go back and just look those up. Committees. This is where kind of the substantive work gets done. All bills get sent to committees, but not all bills get heard in committees. So there's usually about 2,000 bills that get introduced in a given year. And of course, you're not going to have time for all of those. So select lawmakers make up each of these committees. The House has, twice as many members as the Senate. So the House has more committees. It's not necessary that they do, but more committees, you get to have more chairs. More important. So our committee for broadband is the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. They have jurisdiction over broadband. It's the chair of each of those committees that sets the agenda for each hearing. They decide what bills are even going to be for process. Oh, and I'm going to go back in committees. This is where the public also gets to weigh in. So people come and testify, say we really love broadband, then say we really hate broadband, defund it, get rid of the office, and you can send in letters of support, letters of opposition. This is where the public gets to have that voice. And in contrast to the floor hearings, this is where these are closed, no members of the public, just elected officials. And to compare kind of the substance of the conversation and the types, there are more substantive questions in committee. Floor hearings are more dramatic. This is where lawmakers take their, give their big performative Real Housewives of the state legislature speeches, and take those back, with the campaign. That's where all this happens. So if you like that drama, floor hearings are, and they can go for many, many hours. And here are just some rules of session. So all these pieces will kind of fit together, and these will come up as well. So at the beginning of a budget year, the governor has to show their hand first. So the governor, we spend usually the fall and winter months preparing a budget, leading into a budget year in one, and then the governor has to present that first. That usually happens early in session. Then there's a February forecast from Minnesota Management Budget, a different agency, that gives an updated look at how much revenue is coming in, what's the real sort of number to spend in the budget. And so then you might have some revised asks. So the governor's budget would include broadband funding. He asked for $270 million, I think, last year. And then that gets negotiated. But a February forecast could adjust that. You had a huge surplus, way more than expected. All right, maybe $300 million is appropriate. Deadlines come up each session. These really help the legislature kind of focus in. We have 2,000 some bills. We can't work on this all. So first, second, third deadline really start to narrow down what's going to finish off the rest of the year, what's going to make it to these omnibus bills, what has real momentum and potential. And then lastly on this is targets, which are sort of the budget line items, the very high level budget line items. How much each committee and each topic area gets to spend. So how much education gets to spend, how much human services gets to spend, economic development. There's maybe 12 to 15 lines in general. And sometimes you'll have a special carve out, like last year broadband had its own item, very special. And the House and Senate and Governor, all that leadership, the powers that be, negotiated out to be 100 million. Everybody has their priorities. That's just how it shakes out. And then it's up to the committees to then build up, the details of whatever that target is for their committee. And then, of course, they all vote on it. So all these things are happening all at the time. Bills are getting introduced. Committees are meeting usually twice a week for a couple hours each meeting. 4 sessions happening. So basically, like copy and paste all of these and overlap. And how broadband shows up at the legislature. We're most popular in year 1. So OBD, aka free, will be up in the legislature. She'll give the presentation that you just heard. That's usually one that's automatically scheduled. Then when the governor's budget recommendation comes out, that's the second hearing that we attend and just say, here's what we're looking to receive this year. And then Bree is kind of like around for ad hoc hearings that come up. Maybe they're hearing the standalone bill from the lawmaker. You have questions on that. And then later on in session, as broadband comes up, they'll probably be questions. So we come around to those hearings. And like I mentioned, broadband is usually in the agriculture bill. It's the only thing indeed that's in the agriculture bill. Everything else is in a different committee. And indeed in the task force, so there's no requirement that we both agree on the same policy or budget. Like we came in with 270 million. If you want to double that, that's what you need. You are free to push that on your own. But I guess I've never seen us be out of alignment on recommendation. But it could happen. And I guess much of our role here at DEED and with the task force that I feel like ends up doing is just educating lawmakers. Like they have so much they have to know about every single facet of government. Really plain language in broadband. What is RDOF as compared to CPF versus BEAD versus state funding? How much to finish the job? Isn't satellite going to fix everything? I forgot a little bit. Those are just like really basic questions to you all as you work out like the real technical details of this. So that's how broadband really comes up. Legislature funding is the most common thing. Pretty simple bill. Sometimes people try to mess with the policy of what is underserved versus served. Does that include wireline versus wireless, or wireline versus fiber? Small adjacent things come up. And lastly, some key lawmakers to point out here. Senator Eric Putnam is the chair of the Senate Committee, and Representative Smith Bang, the chair of the House Committee that has jurisdiction over broadband. Senator Judy Seeberger and Representative Purcell both carried an individual broadband funding bill. So both were supported with funding the program. And then Senator Tori Westrom has also been the chair on the Senate side and has been supported with broadband. And these people in action. This is a picture of Bree telling the lawmaker, shut up. So this is, they asked Bree to share about the office and the state of broadband and Teddy to talk about the task force report. So we did a joint presentation there. And happy to take any questions, but during the legislative session, Teddy's always asking from the top of each task force meetings to give an update on what's going on in 5-10 minutes, what bills, what is the schedule like that. So.
And thank you, Devin. And during the legislative sessions going, we'll have Devin come in and give us updates on what's happening. And so I figured this was a good kind of just highlight what happens. And we get into the fun that happens. He's right. It's a spaghetti chart happening at the same time. Any questions for Devin? Thanks. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate that update. And then our last topic for the day, here is around an NTIA update with Tom Cars, the federal program officer from NTIA is here with us. So with that, Tom, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Teddy. So, the representative of what we've been talking about today, I'm having connectivity issues. Carol sharing some slides for me, which I appreciate. I was asked to come in and talk a bit about my role in this program and then give an update of kind of where we're at the stage with NTIA funding. Slide. So I'm Tom Karst with the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications Information Administration, Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth. I'm Minnesota's Federal Program Officer for the Broadband Equity and Deployment Program, or BEAD. BEAD is a very complex program and includes a number of requirements that are relatively new compared to how Minnesota has done its broadband work in the past. I'm here to make sure that the Office of Broadband Development and all of the relevant stakeholders have the information and the resources that they need to be able to get Minnesota across the finish line and to be able to get an affordable, reliable, high-speed internet connection to every home and business in the state. The kind of short version is I'm here for you all. I'm here to hear your questions, your concerns, and your recommendations. I'm also an advocate for Minnesota at NTIA. I'm here to share information about BEAD and the Digital Equity Act programs. I'm here to help, and I always have an open door. Just I want to make sure that my contact information is right up front. Next slide. BEAD itself. The ultimate mandate of this is Internet for all. That when this program is said and done, everyone is going to have access to high-speed internet. Minnesota has been allocated, you heard a little bit before, $652 million for this program. That's running through the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development. So that's where applications are going to go. They're the ones developing the initial proposal, final proposal, etc. For where we're at today, the Broadband Office has already completed their 5-year plan. It's available on their website. This is kind of the, here's where we're at, here's where we're going, that really high-level look. Where every state is at right now is in the initial proposal phase. This has 2 big volumes. The first is the mapping challenge process. As Bree noted, not to be confused with the existing challenge process. This is about taking the FCC's broadband data maps and getting them accurate. We know they're not perfect. The FCC knows they're not perfect, which is why we have this process of a state-run, state-level mapping challenge to identify which locations are going to be BEAD funding eligible, who needs to get connected, essentially where the money's going. Volume 2, big second chunk, is the application and the rubric. The idea is anyone who wants to be an applicant can see the application early. They can see how it's going to be scored. It's about encouraging participation and providing transparency. Those get submitted to us at NTIA. We review and we sign off on approval. That kicks off a 12-month window for the final proposal. That's when applications come in. They get to the broadband office. They get reviewed. They get scored, packaged, sent to NTIA to say, here's how we're going to get everyone connected. That kicks off the 4-year construction window. By the end of that, service has to be up and running, and we get to internet for all. Slide. So I've said all 4 or 5 times so far. What do we actually mean by that? It's about funding prioritization and first getting those without access connected, and second getting those with poor connections, better connections, and then the other programmatic work. We have this broken down into 3 definitions: you're served, you're unserved, and you're underserved. Those are first identified through the technology type. To be served, you have to have either wireline access, your cable, your fiber, etc., or licensed fixed wireless. If you only have access to something other than that, you're automatically unserved. If you do have access to one of those 2 categories, and your highest subscribable speed is under 25 megabytes per second download, 3 megabytes per second upload, you're considered unserved. That's that first priority where the funding has to go to get those people connected. The next tier up, the underserved, is same technologies, just a speed bump. That's the 100 megabytes per second download, 20 megabytes per second upload. That's priority 2 funding. And then if there's anything left over, that can go through a wide range of projects, connecting community anchor institutions, the things that make connectivity useful. Next slide. So here's where we're at today. Minnesota and almost every other state is in the it's time to draft initial proposal. We do have a page on our Broadband USA website for when they're posted for public comment. You can see them there. For this 2-volume separation, we've done this as a structure to add to our guidance and our resources to help states move more quickly along this process, with also recognizing that moving quickly is not necessarily the right strategy for every state and every state office's capacity. It's optional. It's not a force. A part of that is Volume 1, the mapping challenge process, can be submitted separately from Volume 2, the application of the rubric. The idea being that Volume 1 is submitted, reviewed and approved. Once Volume 2 is submitted, doesn't have to be reviewed and approved yet. The mapping challenge process can start immediately. Again, the idea being, people submit challenges, they know what's coming, providers can look at the maps early and strategize where they're going to go. Once the Volume 2 is approved, that is where it kicks off that 12-month window. The idea being that you see where you're going, you strategize, you know what you need, you know how it's going to be scored. The hope is to make it easier. On the mapping challenge process itself, again, we know the FCC maps aren't accurate. And that's the big goal of this, is accuracy. We have put together a deed eligible location mapping challenge process model. We have states who don't have the experience that Minnesota has. It gives them a nice guideline of, hey, if you use our model, you know it's going to be approved, it's already been vetted, as well as a few modules that can be added onto that for specialization to each state. That being said, using our model is not required. The states have the discretion to design their own mapping challenge process. It still gets submitted to us for review and approval. But we want to make sure that we're giving as much flexibility as we can within the rules and regulations of a federal program to let states specialize in every part that they can. Volume 1 can be submitted first, Volume 2 seconds, get things expedited, get them out, kicks off, final proposal, That gets reviewed and approved. Money flows. And next slide. I always like to touch on the importance that NTIA knows that access is just the beginning. If you have access but you can't afford it, you're not going to become a subscriber. If you have affordable access but you don't have the devices or digital skills or know the relevant content, you're not going to adopt it into your life. If you have adopted that affordable access into your life, but it doesn't meaningfully advance quality of life, this program will have fallen short. A huge part of why we have the Digital Equity Act programs, which Anna has fantastically done. We want to make sure that it's understood that the ultimate goal of this is about quality of life. Right? It's about providing connectivity and access to resources and opportunity. That's what it all comes down to. Slide. Always like to wrap up with my contact info. As you have questions, concerns, recommendations always help. They always help me advocate additionally for Minnesota. I have an open door. Always feel free to reach out. Hopefully I didn't go too much over time. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. And it won't be the last time we'll have Tom at the task force meeting. Obviously, this was a good first overview for those of you who haven't seen this. And then obviously, as we saw, we're still early in the timeline there. So as we submit our proposal and all the ups and downs, we'll get more updates. Thank you again, and see you soon. Okay, so that concludes the agenda for today. Only thing left now is maybe any other business from task force members that you want to bring up now, or any questions you have.
Steve, I'm curious, do we have to do a report this year? We're short on time. We got to do that.
Right, we talked about this. I don't think we have enough time to do a report this year. What we might want to do is see how things unfold from the proposal submission at the moment. We do have the next meeting, but the next meeting is on November 30th. It gives us enough time to write a letter. So we have done letters in the past where we can put together maybe one or two recommendations. They either go to the governor or the legislature or wherever else that needs to be. It will give us an opportunity to talk about that and then have one more meeting potentially in December if that's so. But yeah, we don't have enough time for
Final October.
usually we, so there's the requirement is to have 10 meetings. So we skip a month in there. And this time we skipped it just because we needed one like before the end of the year is kind of strategically put there. And then it worked out. Other business or other questions or comments from task force members? Any other questions or comments from non-task force? Anybody from the public or other offices that you want to make at this time? Hearing none, I think we're all in good shape. Well, I appreciate everybody's focus and attention, dedication, and actually I know most of you are serving your on your own time, so I do appreciate the effort you put in here. Thank you for a good first meeting. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how we're going to get organized. More to come going forward. Like we said, the next meeting is on November 30th. It should be on your calendar. As far as the meetings, there was one question earlier as far as are we going to do it in person or the hybrid? Well, all meetings will be available virtually, that for sure. We will try to pick meetings where we can get together is better. One of the feedback that came back from the previous task force was that wish we had done well. There was a period of time for 2 years where we couldn't get together, but then things opened up, but we didn't get a chance to get together. So when we're face to face, when more discussion happens, we get to know each other a little better. So we'll try to sprinkle as many of those in as possible, and also try to change venues as well. So we might visit one of your venues if you're open to that. We might go see somebody who's willing to host us. Atlanta Lakes have done that in the past, so I have to do that again. But we'll do that so we can change it up a little bit, and then obviously again virtual option. November 30th, I'm not sure which way we'll go it yet. At the moment, we're told for sure. There's an opportunity to get together. I'll hear about that here in the next couple of weeks. So. With that, I don't have anything else for everyone else. Anyone last comments or questions? All right. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.
We had twice as many sandwiches